All right, so I think a few people were with me last Friday when we also did a workshop. So last Friday I had a morning and afternoon workshop as well. And it's the same kind of material in the sense that we're going to be going through the same topics, but I'm using different references this time. So even if you were here for one or both of the sessions last week, we will be kind of covering some of the same ground, but we're definitely going to be using different references. So you will have the opportunity to draw different pictures, which I think is the main thing. And in terms of how the flow of things is going to go, let's get started off just with our overview. Actually, before we do that, so I'll introduce myself. My name is Krista. I'm one of the senior tutors at Sydney Art School. So I think most of you are Sydney Art School students, is that right? Like you've been at the school, you've been in the art classes? No? I can see some people shaking heads. No? Okay. How did you find us? No, it's fine. At Sydney Art School, I teach some of the kids' classes, but I also teach the adult classes. But for my own work, so I'm a professional illustrator, I do tend to do like picture books, and I do all sorts of different kinds of illustration. I do watercolors as part of my illustration, but I do some more sort of cartoony anime style as well. And more than that, I think I really love anime. So this is a topic that I'm very excited to talk to you all about, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about what anime you like too, so we can talk about that. Someone's already into the chat. Okay, I just got a message. Annabelle and Annie are together and both doing the class. I think I can see one of you is smiling in the video. Hello. Don't be embarrassed, it's all good. So that's a little bit about my experience and who I am. Now, before we sort of get to the specifics of how we're going to run today, let's just talk a little bit about Zoom. You're probably all pretty familiar with using online learning at this stage, because we've been all been doing it for a good year now. But just to sort of refresh ourselves, so everyone's currently muted. If I accidentally mute myself or you can't hear me or something, please do let me know as quickly as possible, because I'll be concentrating on drawing and talking, and I may not notice myself. I'm more than happy for you to use just like emoji reacts to sort of get my attention. But most of the time, I think if you put something in the chat, that's definitely going to pop up for me. So any questions that you have or any comments that you want to make, just pop that in the chat. I'm more than happy for everyone to do that. And then I've got sort of a note to say practice using the controls, but I think everyone is okay with all of that. If you do want to ask a question, as in verbally ask a question rather than typing it out, that's also fine. Just let me know that you'd like to ask a question, and I will unmute you. All right. So what we also like to do, so I teach quite a lot of the online classes during the term as well. And what I also like to do to kind of give you the opportunity of seeing me, comment on or give criticism for your work. If you take photos of your work, and this is what you're seeing on the screen now, this is from one of my students, different stages of her drawing. If you take a photo of your work and then you email it to me at that email address, and I will pop that in the chat as well, then what I can do is I can bring the images up, and where I will bring them up to is Photoshop. And so we'll talk about this in a second as well. So I'll bring them up in Photoshop, and then I can comment on your work, and I can actually make corrections to it at the same time in front of you. But I am also aware that maybe people don't want everyone to be looking at their work at the same time. So if you prefer to just send me an email and say, can you give me some feedback about the work without bringing it up on the screen, I'm also happy to do that. So don't stress out about that too much. And the way that we're going to work in terms of how I'm going to be running the class is I will be doing demonstrations here in Photoshop. So you're going to see me drawing on the screen, except that the target layer is hidden, so that's no good. Okay, here we go. So I'll be drawing live on the screen like that. Better than that, I would say, but that's the general idea. And what I would like you to do is basically just follow along. So you can be drawing. Let's go back. You can be drawing along with any tools that you would like. Let's go to mediums. So you can use pencils, graphite pencil, HB or 2B is good, and working on paper. If you do a traditional medium like that, like pencil, then obviously you need paper, but you might also need an eraser. If you've got a kneadable eraser, that's really good. Does everyone know what a kneadable eraser is? Yeah, most people nodding. It's like a putty eraser. It kind of looks like a piece of blue tack. And what's really good about the kneadable eraser is that when you use it to erase things, you don't end up erasing everything. You can kind of just remove some of the lines. And doing sketches and layering like that, that's something that you'll see me doing even in Photoshop. So it's a really good technique to get yourself used to. But also, you're more than welcome to use a tablet or digital tools if you have those as well. So I will give you just a quick view of what I'm using. So as I mentioned, I'll be using Photoshop, and I've got a Wacom, which is a drawing tablet, and that comes with a pen. So every time when I'm drawing on the screen, that's literally how I'm doing it. I'm not using a mouse, I'm not that good. All right. And later on, last time we didn't actually get to coloring, so, and I suspect we won't this time as well, but if you do have the time, if you do your sketches, you're drawing quite quickly, you can also do some coloring as well. And I would recommend for that colored markers, like the Copic markers. Traditionally, that's what people used for anime and manga. They're quite expensive, so even if you've just got a cheaper version of that, or thinned out acrylic paints or color pencils, whatever you like, really. We're not going to get deep into using color today. This is very much more about the style and technique and the way that you make something look like anime or look like manga. Okay, now what we did last week, we started off with faces and then we did body poses. But I did say this week, because we had a few people who did the morning session last week and then are now doing the afternoon session and vice versa, I did say last week that I would flip it around, and this morning I'll start with body poses and then this afternoon I'll go into faces. We will do a little bit about faces this morning, but it's mostly going to be about body poses. So let's get stuck in with anime and manga examples, bodies and poses. So does everyone know Hayao Miyazaki? He works with Studio Ghibli. So movies that you might know would be this one, My Neighbor Totoro, or you might know Spirited Away, or just lots. There's lots and lots. So My Neighbor Totoro and Mononoke Hime, Princess Mononoke are probably my favorite ones. I also really love Spirited Away, but the reason, and you'll see this more as we go through, the reason I'm bringing up Studio Ghibli, I think, particularly to start with, is that it is very, very popular, but it's also an older, more traditional style of anime. So I think it's a nice place to start with. Hayao Miyazaki was, or started producing work way, way back in the 70s and 80s. So he's been doing manga and anime for a really, really long time. And when I say manga and anime, most of you are probably familiar with what the distinction between those two things is. But if you're not familiar with what it is, So manga is the comic book version, if you like. It's the physical version that you would have in a book or a comic book or a graphic novel. And anime is the animated version. So that covers TV and movies. Now, I do have some examples which are going to be from computer games, because there are computer games that have crossed over in terms of they were a manga and then they were an anime and now they're a computer game. So it is a really broad and very big topic, but it does all sort of start all the way back here in the 70s and 80s. And so My Neighbor Totoro is one of the oldest examples. And I think it's interesting to look at the way that the style has changed and developed, but also the way that different types of storytelling use different kinds of design, character design. So if we jump cut to something that is distinctly different, we're looking here at Dragon Ball by artist Akira Toriyama. And again, Dragon Ball, even though it is continuing into the modern age, we have Dragon Ball GT now, which is right up to date. This also started decades ago. So the original Dragon Ball, again, is from sort of 70s and 80s. And the character design has updated over the course of the years. But even back then, it was a very distinct kind of design. And particularly looking on the right, you can see there's a little Goku, that's young sort of Goku, but his face, his posture, his expression, the design of his body, distinctly different from looking at Mei from My Neighbor Totoro, for example. So even at this level, when you've got two artists who are working at a similar time, there's a lot of variation. And the variation is on purpose. There's a reason why Mei looks the way she does. And the reason she looks that way is because Hayao Miyazaki is telling us something very important and very specific about her character. She's a young girl, she's sort of full of wonder, and she's going to go off into the woods and find Totoro and have amazing adventures with him. Whereas Goku, he's even as a small child, he's out there fighting aliens and stuff. So the character design, when you're thinking about making your own characters, it's important to think about how they differ and what different kinds of body shape or facial shape say about a specific character. Now, if we go to Legend of Zelda, and I mentioned we'd be looking at character design that's not just manga, anime, but also computer games. And Legend of Zelda, I think, is another one that's quite interesting because it also has spanned a few decades. So the most recent Breath of the Wild design, which is the one that's on the left, versus the more sort of Wind Waker chibi design that you see on the right-hand side. Again, there's a lot of variation, and this is variation even within one character. I also just mentioned the word chibi there. Everyone knows the word chibi, what that means? Yep, most people nodding along. Well, everyone I can see has got a camera on is nodding along. So for those of you who aren't sure or don't know, chibi is a specific kind of manga design where the characters are very, very cute. And usually it's minimizing the elements of the body, like the limbs. So the size of the body is reduced, the size of the arms and legs are reduced, and the detailing on the arms and legs is reduced a lot. So if you look down here, for example, on Link's feet, we've got 3 examples of his feet. We've got his feet that look like pretty much like realistic normal feet, a little bit sketchy. Then we've got feet over here on the far right, which are more stylized and more reduced. And then we've got feet in the middle that are basically just little stumps. So the chibi kind of design idea is to reduce things down, make them smaller and finer and cuter and less detailed. And then it's usually combined with a much larger head. And so the size of the head is part of what makes chibi and also what makes it look more cute. Now, having a look at Pokemon. And so Pokemon, again, has crossed over. It's manga, it's anime, and it's also computer games and card games. I mean, it's sort of gone into every genre you can possibly think of. but before we sort of carry on, I just want to go back again and refresh. So have a look at, for example, the eyes, the face, the character design, so arms and legs, and compare Ash here to Link, to Goku, and to Mei. So already just picking 4, and I mean, I have picked them on purpose, but just picking 4 different character designs, you can see that there's a really big range of what would be considered anime design. But looking at all of these, we all know that they're anime. There's no argument in anyone's mind that these are not anime, or these, you know, which ones are anime, which ones aren't. They're all anime. And anime design doesn't have to do necessarily with it was made in Japan. I mean, certainly for a long period of time, that is how it was defined. But it's a specific style of art. It's a specific look. And it's one of those things that I think sometimes you kind of either know it or you don't. I don't have the physical example here, but an example of a Western producer who has made an anime style, I would say, would be Avatar: The Last Airbender and the Legend of Korra. Does everyone know those two anime? Yeah. So that's anime, but it was done by a Western production company. So it's, even though it's not being made in Japan anymore, there is a sense of we can look at that and go, well, it's definitely anime. And that's about the style and the character design. Okay, we're just going to look at a couple more. And again, it's just thinking about the way that there is such a broad range of different character designs and different ways of representing characters. So this is One Piece. I don't know if everyone knows One Piece. One Piece is, again, it's another one that's been going for a really, really long time. But you look at One Piece and the character designs are very unique. Every character has very different and very distinct kind of facial features and way that they're being drawn. And then we'll have a look at My Hero Academia, which I know is super popular at the moment as well. And again, having a look at facial design, so how the eyes are drawn, how the nose is drawn, or rather how much of the nose is there, how the mouth is drawn. All of these are the elements of what makes anime look like anime. It's very much eyes, nose, mouth are 3 big factors, but also shape and design of the body. So even the way that the sort of muscles are drawn. And this is where, talking about going sort of all the way back to Goku, the way that his body is drawn and represented, the sort of over the top muscliness of him, versus the way that other characters, even within this particular world, are drawn. You've got some characters who are also super muscly, and then you have some characters who are more slender, but all of those design elements are saying something specific about that character. Okay, before we sort of get stuck into then doing some of our own character design, are there any questions? Because we've been going for about 20 minutes with me talking nonstop. And I'd love to hear your thoughts or any questions that you might have at this stage. Anyone? No? Okay, I'm going to carry on then. Oh, no, people raising hands. Feel free to unmute yourself and you can ask a question, because we're not all talking at the same time.
Are we allowed to get like a picture of an anime that we like and then draw that one?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely. So what we're going to do soon, let me just change over to Photoshop. What we're going to do soon is do like a copy along of a character. The character that I've chosen. Where are we here? Yes. This is from My Hero Academia. And I'm going to do step by step how to follow and how to create this character, but you can do whatever character you like. I would just say follow the same kind of step by step that I'm doing, if that makes sense. So we'll sort of like, you know, start with specific kinds of body proportion, and then we'll do, you know, head, shoulders, arms, all that kind of stuff. So you don't have to copy the exact same picture that I'm doing at all. But I think just make sure that you're following the same step by step. Does that make sense? Yes? No? Okay. And there was a question in the chat as well. Is this the faces course or the body course? This is the body course for Amelia. Yeah. So I did the faces course in the morning last time, and this is going to be the body course. But as I said, we'll be doing different examples. Last time for the body one, I did Ash Ketchum, and so this time we're going to do Izuku. All right. So let me reshare. All right. So before we get into the example, there's a couple of just step by step that I want to go through in terms of how we're going to put this together. So with figure drawing, you've probably seen this idea of the framework before in terms of looking at the big oval shapes and the triangle shapes and that kind of thing. I'm going to go through it more step by step with you as well. But I do just want to sort of mention what the different areas are and why I'm putting them together in this way. Oh, sorry, someone was just asking if I could share my email again. Yes, I will. I'm going to put that in the chat right now. Oops. Bear with me. Okay, so did I? Oh, I did that as a direct message. Sorry. Okay. Okay. Whoops. Go back. Okay. So the big shapes that we're looking at: head, rib cage, hips. So head shape, and we'll go a little bit more into the steps of the head shape. Rib cage shape, rib cage being like a big egg, essentially. And hips, I usually put a triangle shape in for the hips. The hips are obviously more complicated shape than that, but for the sake of it being nice and quick and you being able to sketch, then hips is what we're looking at, triangle is what we're looking at there. Straight arms or straight lines for the arms and legs. So if you think about the bones that are in your body, thinking about the humerus bone, which is the bone on your upper arm from your shoulder to your elbow, it's a straight bone. So from the top to the bottom, it's basically a straight line. So if we use straight lines to represent the angles that those bones are creating, when we then fill the muscle over the top, we've got the right kind of structure. What often happens, I think, especially when people are sketching from their imagination, is they kind of forget that underneath the structure of especially our limbs, our arms and legs, there are straight bones. And the important thing to think about as well, even with characters that are being stylized, which I would say anime characters are definitely being stylized, there is still an internal logic in the way that their bodies are put together. And there's still a sense of an underlying structure. So if you're looking at Izuku here, you can see from his shoulder to his elbow to his wrist, there is straight line connections. And that's representing where those bones are. And then there's muscle shapes that are put over the top of that bone construction. I'd say one of the examples of where this is not true would be a character like Luffy in One Piece, because he has the ability to kind of stretch his limbs off to ridiculous kind of directions and lengths. But that's a magical kind of property of his specific character. When he's standing normally, when he's just in his sort of normal physical capacity, he still has the same kind of thing of shoulder to elbow, elbow to wrist. There are straight lines, straight angles here. And the same with the legs. You've got bone coming from the side of the hip down to the knee, and from the knee down to the ankle. Now, I've put in triangles for knees and elbows. A lot of people use a circle. And the reason I'm using a triangle as opposed to a circle is because, especially with a kneecap, it is a triangular shape. It's not a circular shape. And the same with the elbows. The actual join of the elbow is more of a triangular shape. When you get to an elbow that is bent, especially, have a look at the bend on both of Luffy's elbows there. You can see it comes to a point. It's triangular. It's not circular. And I think the more that you can get away from using too many circles, the better. Because generally with circles, it's very easy for them to get out of control and end up too large or too small. Whereas something that's a bit more angular gives you a little bit more structure to work with. Then thinking about hands and feet, which a lot of people do struggle with. Again, avoid circles for hands and feet. Think about hands as having more of a rectangular or diamond construction. And for feet, we're looking at triangles. Basically, feet are almost always triangular, whether they're seen from the front or the side. So next time you're looking at an image, next time you're looking at a figure or a reference, just notice those particular elements. So feet are triangular, hands are rectangular or diamonds. Look at the direction and angle of the arms and legs, and notice the way that they are quite straight. They're also coming from the sides of the body in the sense of the shoulders. So the arms come from the shoulders and the legs come from the sides of the hips, not from the middle of the body. So if I go across to Photoshop again, if we're thinking about the structure, let me zoom in. It's too far in. Thinking about the structure of the body. So as I said, arms coming from the sides of the shoulders and legs coming from the sides of the hips, as opposed to arms and legs coming from the middle of the body, coming from the spine. Oops, can't help myself. I just immediately draw shoulders on it. This is the middle of the spine, and you imagine arms coming from the middle of the neck and legs coming from the middle of the body. That's much more of a hangman kind of stick figure, but it's not appropriate for basically any kind of figure drawing. It's only useful for hangman. It serves no other purpose. If we're looking at Izuku here again, you got, if I was to imagine his arms and legs coming from the middle of his body. See the angle, if it was coming from here and the angle here, the angles would be all off. The structure of the body wouldn't work. So we need to make sure we're including shoulder width. You can see shoulder width here and the hip width. And the arms and legs are coming from the sides of both of those. Let's get rid of that. Okay. Now, once you've got your basic structure, then we're filling in the muscle shape. So that's the middle one that you can see there, is adding muscle structure over the top. And then we can fill out the muscle shapes over the skeleton, and we can erase those sketch lines underneath and fill in more of the details. So here's an example. This is actually one that we did last week. And you can see using the same kind of structure. So looking at the circle on the face, the circle in the rib cage, and the triangle on the hips, and then directional lines for legs, triangles for knees, directional lines for arms, triangles for elbows, muscle shapes. And using this example, we then had this sort of structure, this sketch built up on the right, and then eventually erased all of those lines and filled it back in. And we end up with a very cute anime version of that reference. All right, so let's get to the practical part now. And again, before we get going, are there any questions on any of the stuff we've covered so far? No, we're all good. All right.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So are we allowed to draw something that only contains the body parts, the head and the torso?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, I'd still be kind of paying attention to the rest of what's being said. But if you've got a specific kind of drawing that you're really keen to draw, then yeah, by all means do that. What we're also going to do a little bit later on is we're going to take, so the first example we're going to do is kind of copying an existing reference. So, you know, as I said, in this case, we're doing Izuku from My Hero Academia. And then in the second half of the lesson, what we'll do is actually take a photo reference, like the girl on the broomstick, and we'll make a character design based on that. So we're going to be doing 2 drawings today. So maybe for the second one, pick something that's a full body rather than just head and torso.
Krista, can I ask also the question?
Mm-hmm.
That's so basically you can divide the whole process of drawing for 3 stages. It's like skeleton, muscles, and the clothes later, right?
Yes, very much.
So you can start with the lines and then the muscles and the clothes.
Yeah, so I'd say you can kind of build up the sketch to the point where the character, you've got all of the character position and body structure and everything set, and then put the clothing on top. Yeah. But this very much step by step is the basic structure, building up the muscles and starting to work on the details. And this is all the sketch kind of part of it. And then the fine line, so the last kind of line work that you're doing, that should be over the top of some lighter sketch work. All right, just before we go ahead, I do want to quickly do roll call and make sure that everybody is here. I can see some people's names, but some people's names I can't see. So if you can just give me a shout out if you're here. So Cormac, I just saw Cormac wave. Excellent. Annie's there. It was Annie and no, hang on, Annabelle and Annie, is that right? Yes, great. And then, oh, we've got an Anna as well. Anna? No, no one's waving. Saskia? Great. Arushi?
I'm here.
Awesome. Amalia? Saw you last week.
Yeah.
Awesome. Samantha? Hang on. So I've Samantha. Oh, Kimberly's here. Great. No Samantha, as far as I can tell. So Jude and Ruby both here. Jude, Ruby both here. Keita.
Yeah.
Awesome. Ryder. Ryder. Nope. Georgia. Georgia's waving. Harmony. No, no Harmony. Okay. All right. So let me just swap over my keyboard and drawing tablet so that I can draw more freely. All right. Now, if anyone is doing digital drawing as opposed to traditional kind of drawing, I would just say to you an idea, especially if you've got a program like Photoshop where you can use layers. If you can see down here on the right-hand side, I've got a couple of different layers going at the same time. And there's a layer here, which has got a blue layer linked to it over the top. And what that means is if I draw on this layer, even though my pen color is black, if I draw on this layer, it's going to come out blue. And that's basically to kind of imitate it being a sketch. So I can reduce the opacity of that later on as well, which means when I put my final line work over the top, I'm not going to have lots of sketchy marks. For the rest of you who are doing it with just pencil and eraser, then what I said before about if you've got a kneadable eraser, so you can just take off a little bit rather than taking off all of your lines, that's the best idea. And certainly when you come to do your final line work, using a pen, if you were to use a pen to do your final line work, then you definitely want to take off as much pencil as possible, because once you try and put ink over the top of pencil, it's very easy to smudge the ink if you're trying to remove the pencil later. So what happens essentially is the graphite creates a very slick surface, and the ink going over the top of that, when you try and erase it, the ink lifts off at the same time or smudges and smears at the same time with the pencil, with the graphite. The reason I use blue as a background, as my under kind of layer here, is because that's what traditional comic artists used to do as well. And so it's just something that's become a habit. Traditional comic artists used to do, Marvel and DC kind of comics. They would draw in a blue pencil, the sketch artist would draw in a blue pencil, and then the inker would come over the top and ink in black. And so when the image was scanned to be saved and printed, only the black lines would show up. That's just a little bit of trivia for you, a bit of extra information. All right, so let's get started. As I said, you can copy along with this image if you like. If you've got your own image that you want to do, that's also fine. The stages that we're going to do are the same stages. So no matter if you're doing your own image or if you're doing this image with me, just make sure that you're kind of following the same step by step. All right, so first thing we want to do is get an idea of the overall size and structure of the body. So looking at shoulders and coming down through the angle of the body here, and then getting in some of that rib cage and hips. Then, as I said, we've got straight line to the knee. Get the whole thing on the page here. And foot, which is in a big shoe. Straight line to the knee. And foot. Then from the arms are coming out of the shoulders, and we've got an angle from shoulder to elbow, and then elbow to wrist. And I mentioned before the hands being rectangular shape or diamond shape. If you have a look, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's not exactly a perfect diamond, it's a slightly wonky diamond, but it is overall sort of a diamond-ish shape for that hand. And then with this one, again, direction, it's coming down to the side to the elbow here, and then angle across here. And with this hand, we're looking more at a rectangle, that little thumb over the edge. And triangle shapes for the elbows. Then neck and head. Now, head construction, want something that's circular for the top of the cranium. And then adding a little bit of the jaw to the bottom. So head shape, do a bigger version here, circular. And it's very hard to draw a perfect circle. So, and if any of you are doing the afternoon class, we're going to go more deeply into faces. But something that I would say to you, I think especially when people are starting off, they really try and get a perfect circle the first time, and they draw really hard and really dark. My suggestion would be start as light as possible, and as long as it takes. So just keep going around and around until you find the right kind of circle. Then you can get more detail, you can be more specific with it later. But don't try and nail the circle the first time, because what you'll end up with is just a really hard, dark line that probably still isn't a very good circle anyway. Now we're going to have hair is kind of doing some of this. We'll get stuck into the hair a little bit later. But just to give us an overall sense of where things are. This is our first stage. So we've got shoulders, rib cage, hips, direction of the legs, direction of the arms, triangle knees, triangle elbows, triangle feet, diamond or rectangle hands, and face. We're looking at a big circle on top, and then a small jaw. And so the small jaw is like a little triangle that also goes up and to the sides a tiny bit. So slightly more angular as it goes up into the circle, but overall basically a triangle. Okay, all good so far. Any questions at this stage? Oh, sorry, I missed the question about if your character has a bird head, can you still use the circle as a base and just treat it like a 3D sphere and put a triangle on it? Is there a specific character that you're looking at? Because that would probably make it easier for me to show you the example. If you want to send me, you can send me a link to the character that you're doing or thinking of doing, and I can have a look at it. I mean, I guess very quickly, what I would say is that most mammals have more or less the same kind of head construction. I mean, physically, most mammals are sort of work on the same base, if you like, in the sense that we've all got skulls and spines and rib cages and pelvises and humerus and femurs, and like all of the actual bone structure is basically the same. It's just different lengths and kind of shaped differently. So, but birds aren't mammals. So if we're thinking about mammals, if we're thinking about birds as opposed to mammals, then you are looking at something that would have more or less the kind of round structure, but probably a bigger, much bigger kind of eye socket. And the eyes are going to be on either side of the head as opposed to in the middle of the face, like on a human. And then that sort of beak will be coming out and taking up quite a width, if you know what I mean, like from top to bottom. It's not going to be in the same position as just the sort of nose and mouth. It's going to be much longer. And Then someone was saying, what if we have more of an oval head? So what I would generally say with heads, is that with anime heads, they do have more of the sort of size and proportion of children's heads, which means that you're looking at a jaw that's much more undersized, and the position of the eyes is lower down the face. If you've got a character that is much older, is meant to be an adult, even if the jaw sort of length is going to be longer, it's still not going to be a perfect oval. Nobody's head is a perfect oval. There's always a jaw coming off, which has more of an angular kind of shape to it. So it might be longer from top to bottom than, say, Izuku here, but it's still not going to be a perfect oval. I don't think there's really any heads in the world that have a perfectly oval head. So if the head that you're looking at, you want it to be a little bit more kind of oval or a little bit more elongated, I would say just bring that jaw down a bit more. Okay. So put in some more detail now. Into the face. So positioning the eyes, as I mentioned, the eyes are going to be sort of middle between the top of the head to the bottom of the jaw, but it's the top of the eyes as opposed to the middle of the eyes. So if we're looking at a regular sort of proportioned head, so not an anime character, what you generally find is that the middle of the eyes are in the middle of the head from top to bottom. But with an anime character, because we're basing on someone who is meant to look physically younger and kind of cuter, generally the eyes are also larger, then actually where the middle of the head is, the eyes end up being lower. And so you end up with bigger eyes that are lower positioned on the face. And that gives you more of the anime kind of look. I don't know what's going on with the hair there. Now it's become fuzzy hair. So with our character over here, you can see that that's true. It's the top of the eyes, even though his eyes are open very wide, the top of the eyes are in the middle of the head. And then we're going to have mouth coming in some around here. We might end up needing a little bit more face, a little bit more width on that face. Now my line work's getting a little bit messy. So you may be finding your line work's getting a bit messy as well. So now's a good time to maybe tidy some of it up, take away some of those excess lines. Just refine that slightly more. You can see his eyes very, very big and wide, and have a look at the position of his eyeballs as well. They're quite towards the center of his eyes, which is part of his character. And his nose is basically just a little dot. Now we'll give him a bit of width on the neck. And we can start to refine, build up the shape of the muscles. And so those are following the same line that we've already placed. And then when we come down to leg shape, we're looking at a big oval for the upper leg. And towards the bottom of the legs, and this applies to the forearm as well, what we're looking at is there's a muscle shape that's in the calf, the muscle shape here in the calf, and it's mostly, it's closest to the joint. So it's close to the knee joint. And then as it comes further down, it starts to thin out. Now, he's obviously got a lot of armor and kind of stuff on. So it's a little bit harder to see. If we go, for example, to this example we used last week, there you can see a little bit more clearly that sense of the muscle in the upper part of the lower leg, a round kind of muscle there. And again, same in the forearm, you've got a round muscle that's close to the joint, close to the elbow or close to the knee, and then it thins out and it becomes flatter as it gets towards the wrist or the ankle. So let's see how we're going. It's looking pretty good so far. I've got a sense of the position and direction of arms, legs. We've added some muscle shapes. We're getting a sense of what his face looks like. So far, so good. Any questions at this point? Sorry, I was just having a quick look at the chat. I just noticed there was a few questions coming in. Zuko from Demon Slayer. Okay, let me try and pull it up. Yeah, we'll go into, and also a couple of people asking about whether we'll do more detail on the head. Yes, we will go into more detail on the head. We're just going to do a little bit of the body this morning, so looking more broadly at body poses. So hang on. Okay, so I was just having a look at the question you wrote, Annie, about Nezuko. So, I mean, in terms of, I guess, eyes and nose, you're looking at pretty, similar to already what I'm doing. But the mouth, the sort of the bamboo thing that she has over her mouth, really I'd just construct it with kind of straight lines. It's basically a cylinder, isn't it? So think about where it is in terms of its position on the mouth. and just make sure that you have, still have the proportions, have enough room from the middle of the eyes all the way down to the chin. And then asked about was Kakashi. Yeah, okay. So with Kakashi, and this is from Naruto. Let me just bring him up so that everyone can see what we're talking about here. The image. Oops. So this is Kakashi. And who was asking about that? Cormac's asking, what do I do for nose and mouth? I mean, in this situation, essentially nothing. It's very much going to be still putting in the eyes, and we're still putting a sense of where the side of the nose is, and the outline of the jaw, but there's just not going to be anything in terms of the mouth, position. So we're just looking at the major outline. As I said, yes, I will do more that's going to be just on the head after we've done a little bit more sketching on the body. So don't worry, we will get more into head proportions, and particularly the eyes. I think the eyes are the main thing. So let's just keep going with this for a bit longer. So is everyone with their character design, is everyone more or less at this kind of point? Yeah, thumbs up. Okay. So we'll fill in a bit more of the costume design now. So first we're looking at hands. So we've got the big broad gloves here. Fill out those a bit more. I'm putting on sort of some shoulder pads. Fill out a bit of width on those elbow pads. You can see I'm just using a lot of straight lines at this stage. So and then around the knees, again, we've got big sort of extra layering and padding. For whatever character you're working on, if you're working on a different character, the main sort of piece of general advice I'd be giving is look for the sort of the big angles. So look for the angular kind of shape of the design. So with these, we've got basically straight lines, we've got squares, we've got triangles, we've got diamond kind of shapes. And all of that builds up to create this costume that he's wearing. Shoes are always a little bit tricky. But again, try and follow the big broad shapes. And overall, as I mentioned, we've got sort of a triangular kind of construction. Okay, I can see everyone's working away. Now I've had a message saying people are worried that we're not doing the right class or it's not the right information. Okay, yeah, sorry about that. If there's been a bit of confusion, it's obviously it's an anime class, and I will definitely get to faces. So we're going to do more about faces. I think there was just some confusion about what was being advertised online and then what information I was given, but don't worry, we'll do faces. We've still got a good hour and a half, so we'll definitely get into some details about that. And I'm hoping you're still all learning something and that it's still very interesting. Okay, so a couple more minutes just to get you up to this point. And then I'm going to put in some line work, some ink work over the top. All right, so how's everybody going? Are we all more or less at this kind of place? Getting some thumbs up, getting some not so sure. All right. I will keep going. I'm going to zoom in now. Sorry, I was just having a look. I've got some emails here. Okay, so I just saw Annie's one for Nezuko. It's looking good. Yeah, so Nezuko is more of a like more of the young girl chibi kind of style, isn't she? Yeah, but so far so good. Appreciating that. If you want as well, like if people want me to check your work very quickly, you can also just hold stuff up to the screen. That's fine. I can definitely try and have a look at it then. All right, and I will need to put my eraser up. There we go. We'll do some inking now. Okay, so I've changed to the new layer. And this is where my inking layer is going to go. And I've also reduced the opacity of my sketch layer. I'll reduce that even more. So from this point, I'm going to be working mostly off my sketch drawing, more so than looking at the reference as much. And we'll go over and check. So as I say, we will get to more details on faces, particularly eyes, because often nose and mouth, there's not much in terms of detail. Get those round eyes here. Detail on the nose. And mouth. Now, this is a tool here that I'm using. Just notice it's gone sideways. This is a tool that I use all the time when I'm using Photoshop, which is the rotate tool. So you can rotate the image around. And the reason I'm pointing that out to you is because you should also rotate your image if you need to. So don't feel like you need to keep your picture at the same angle. If it's easier for you to rotate your drawing around while you're drawing to get at different angles, then you should definitely do that. Now, in terms of hair, or eyebrows first, eyebrows and hair, he's just got most of his hair is kind of hidden. Oh, sorry, most of his eyebrows are hidden in his hair. And the outline of the hair is the most important thing. So we've got this, so these flicky little curls coming into the outline there. And the overall shape, just looking for that overall shape first off. with our curls. And then you notice the way that it's essentially just big blocked in shadow shape. We've got essentially just two colors with his hair. And so the shadows of his hair is just a big blocked in mass. And that's all one single color then. Make that a bit darker. Obviously doing this as a live demonstration, it's not going to be 100% perfect, but hopefully be good enough for you to get the idea. So I can block that hair in. It's a lot of hair there. Okay. Now let's have a look at hands. And so thinking about the hands, got the bigger shape first, which I said is that sort of diamond kind of shape. And then break the fingers up off of that main shape is what would be my recommendation. And then all of that line work we did in the first place, sort of building that costume shape out. As I said, we're looking at pretty much straight lines. It's a very complicated outfit, so we won't get stuck into all the details. So I know we're eager to get into more about faces. But just so we've got an idea, so we've got something slightly more finished off. We'll work on this for a couple more minutes. So same idea with this hand, we're looking at big angles and just breaking the overall shape up rather than drawing the individual fingers, which I think is what a lot of people do when they start off. Look for that big outline first and break the shape up. And so coming down to the legs, I mentioned before about the muscle being closer to the joints. Shoes. Shoes are always a little bit tricky. We won't get into deep coloring for this one. We'll just work on a line drawing. All right, let's zoom out, see how he's looking. So if I take away all of my sketchy lines underneath, that's where he is at so far. Oh, it doesn't have ears. Ears coming in there somewhere. Oops. Whoa, zoom way too far. Okay. So that's a bit of a primer there for looking at just general body construction and character design. But let's get stuck into talking about faces more specifically. Oops. Oh, that's not the right one. Here we go. Okay. Just going to bring up my primer. Okay. So with faces, I mean, a lot of the character design stuff I was talking about before, it still applies in the sense of thinking about how characters are unique and different. And all of those characters we were talking about, you know, Goku, Luffy from One Piece, all of the different character designs, they all have their own unique character. And it usually says something about the individual. So this first, because everyone see what's on the screen at the moment, common facial proportions, is that the right one? Yeah, okay. So these common facial proportions, these apply to just sort of regular people. So for more kind of realistic drawing. I touched on this briefly before, but we're going to go into a lot more detail now. So with common facial proportions, the middle of the eyes is in the middle of the face. So that's what I was saying before about having, if you imagine the top and bottom of the head, the middle of the eyes is running right through the middle of the face. The eyes are also one distance apart from each other. So if you took the full width of the eye and then did that same distance between the eyes, it's one eye distance between the eyes. The ears line up with the eyes and nose. So the bottom of the nose lines up to the bottom of the ear, and the eyes line up to the top of the ear. The nose may line up with the insides of the eyes. The corners of the mouth often line up with the middle of the eyes. So the reason I'm showing you this facial proportion example is because there is still a lot of this that is true for anime, but there are some important differences. There are some significant and important differences. When we look at the anime proportions, so the most important one, which I mentioned before, is that from the top of the head to the bottom of the chin, the eyes, the top of the eyes are now lining up. So the eyes are actually lower, if you have a look, compared to this one. The eyes are also bigger. I mentioned the eyes being a lot bigger. The nose is 3/4 down the face. The eyes are still one eye distance apart though. So that part of normal facial proportions still holds true. The eyes are still one eye distance apart. The mouth is closer to the nose than it is to the chin. And that's also still true for normal facial proportions. And what this face is more similar to, if we have a look at a child's face, it's more similar to child proportions. So what's the big difference between an adult and a child's face? What's the big difference that makes this one, the common proportions that we think of when we're being taught facial construction, versus this one? So when you're looking at a child's face, their eyes are bigger, just like anime eyes, and their jaw is smaller. So the top of the head is actually more or less the same, whether you're an adult or whether you're a child. But when you're a child, your jaw is much smaller. And that's true for anime as well. Now, there are anime characters, more masculine characters, or older, more adult characters who will have bigger jaws. And you can see the position of the eye then changes. The eyes are a little bit smaller and they're a little bit higher on the head. So they're closer to the middle. But even so, it's usually still a smaller, sort of thinner, more refined jaw and still bigger eyes than you would find on a normal sort of proportion. So we're going to do a copy of this one and then we'll talk a little bit more about specifics. So talking the specific kind of eye design, because I think generally, as I say, it's the eyes that tend to be the most important part of the anime face. When we're looking at nose and mouth, you can see in both of these, often the nose and mouth, sometimes it's literally just a line. Sometimes it can be a little triangle, but often there's not that much to the nose and mouth. So I think really it is the eyes that are the most sort of important and characteristic part of anime. You'll also notice with a child proportion, the chin is smaller and the angle of the jaw, so the way that it comes into the jaw, is sharper. And again, that's more similar to anime than on an adult. Okay. So come away from that and we will bring up this one. Get rid of those two. Oh, not that one. Where is it? And there we go. Okay. So let's have a look at this face template and have a go of copying along with this. Just going to bring up a new layer here. So I've got a sketch layer, same as before. I'm just going to concentrate on faces now. Okay, so everyone ready to copy along with this one? I can see a few people are having some snacks, which is fine. I've been doing non-stop drawing for a while, so if you want to have a snack, totally fine. Our starting point, which we started same with the other one, starting with an oval and then putting the angle of the jaw on. For this one, do copy along with this example rather than your own example, but we will have an opportunity to, as I say, go into more detail with eyes, a little bit of nose and mouth, but there's not that much to nose and mouth. So face, starting off with the oval, and I said to you before, sketch, oh, sorry, not oval, circle, I should say, sketch that circle out. So don't feel like you got to get it right the first time. Then look at these angles here. We've got an angle coming down from the side of that circle, and then two more angles which are coming in to make the jaw. So straight lines, angles, and straight lines, angles for the chin and jaw. So we've got our basic facial shape. If yours is slightly different, that is a-okay, but this is the general idea. Then we can put in the line that's going down through the middle of the face. This line is giving us a sense of where the middle of the face is, and it should be running down through the nose. So we've got a face that's facing us, as in she's completely directly front onto us. If she was more 3/4, if she was more side on, then the position of this would change. So this wouldn't necessarily be directly in the middle of the face anymore. Then if we cut that in half, top to bottom, we're saying the eyes are underneath that line. So the top of the eyes are going to be touching this line through the middle of the face. And we can go ahead and position the bottom of the eyes too, because we've got the top of the eyes. Let's put in where the bottom of the eyes is. And then let's also make the width of the eyes. Now we'll go into eye shape a little bit more deeply soon, because there are various eye shapes that we can have. But we want it to be, all of these to be the same width. And so blocking that in is a really good idea to make sure that they're going to be the same width. Now, nose is 3/4 of the way down, so it's going to be there somewhere. And mouth, a little bit closer to the nose than it is to the chin. So far, so good. All right, I was just having a look. There was a couple of emails, people sending their work through. Looks good, from what I can see. So I got from Annie. Very, very nice. And you did a good job. Good job on the face and mouth, I think. And then also from Amalia. Looks awesome. I love your Izuku. Very, very cool. Okay, everybody up to this point with our face? Yep, great. Let's keep going. So we're going to sketch in just roughly where the top eyelid is going to go to start with. And so I'm starting with the top eyelid. The reason I'm starting with that top eyelid is because if you start with the top eyelid, you can work out, make sure that it's the right position, that it's the right sort of size and the right sort of shape. If you do one eye complete, which is what a lot of people do, they sort of tend to just do one eye, finish that whole eye, and then try and move across and do the other eye. The problem with that is that you end up with one perfect eye, and then you're trying to match that one perfect eye to another perfect eye, and it's really hard. It can be really hard to get them the same. So if you just start off with essentially the top eyelid, making sure that that's the right size and shape, then even if you do get into a bit more detail with the rest of the eye, you've got a good sense of where it is, and you've made sure that it is the right sort of size and shape. Now put in where the pupil and iris are going to go. So iris being the colored part and pupil being the black part of the eye. And make sure that they are big enough. Again, with anime, proportions are being exaggerated. So we do end up with a pupil and an iris that are much bigger than they would be on just a regular face. We can also put in the ears. So top of the ear mentioned is lining up with the top of the eye, and the bottom of the ear is lining up with the nose. Now, neck, especially on a sort of young female character like this, the neck is going to be pretty thin, but don't lose the width of the shoulders. So don't make the shoulders too narrow. Now, eyebrows will be a little bit higher up. Okay, so this is very much my sketch. And if you're following along at home and doing your pencil drawing, you can now remove some of your sketch. We'll make it a bit more specific. So reduce that sketch all the way down. I'm going to zoom in. So I'm happy with the position, size and proportion of the eyes, nose, mouth, the facial features. And I can start to refine it. So starting with the eyes are very much the most important part. And again, starting with that top eyelid. So rotated it so that you can get the best angle on it. And very much build it up. So start with your thin line and build it up. You can always take a little bit away. Is anyone else doing anything digitally, or is everyone just working with pencil and paper at the moment? All right, so I'm happy with the size and shape of the top eyelid, and I put in some eyelashes. So there's like 3 eyelashes on either side coming off that top eyelid. You can make your top eyelid thicker or thinner, depending on what your preference is, but also sort of depending on the type of character that you have too. I'll bring some of the bottom eyelid. The bottom eyelid is coming from the corner and down. Make sure that that's also nice and even. And this, what I'm making here, this is the fold that comes into the corner of the eye. So if you think about your own eyes, you generally have your top eyelid folds over a little bit into the actual corner of your eye. Zoom out, see how that's looking. Okay. Now, the position of the iris and the pupil is very important. We want to make sure that the character is going to be looking directly at us. What I would suggest, what I always like to do, is start small. So start with a little bit of the pupil, just in the middle of the eye. The character is facing directly front onto us. And make sure that the character is looking at you. And when I say that, what I mean is, so right now the character is looking at us when you're looking at the image. I hope everyone agrees on that. But if I were to take the pupil away and move it, so move it over here, just take that away, it's now looking to the right. And the same would be true if I took that away and moved it so it's over here. Now we have a character looking to the left. So to make it look like it's looking at you, takes a little bit of practice. And you kind of know it when you see it. There's no particular rule, because it's not necessarily about it being directly in the middle of the eye. There's just a position, and as I say, usually you build it up a little bit. There's a position where you can kind of look at it and go, yep, now they're looking at me. And if you start in the middle and work your way up, work your way out slowly, and correct it as you go. So if you need to move it slightly to the left or move it slightly to the right, you'll end up with the character looking at you. Now we want to have a tiny bit underneath where the iris is going to go to represent the bottom eyelid. And then we can go ahead and put in the iris. And the shape of the iris should follow the shape of the pupil. Now notice the way the top of the iris is being covered by the top eyelid. And this gives the character a sort of relaxed look. If we go back to the Zuku, notice the way, so his pupil and iris are completely exposed, as in, well, I mean, it looks like he doesn't even have an iris, really. He's mostly just got a pupil, but the whole iris, the whole pupil are completely exposed. And that gives him sort of like a a bright, wide-eyed, energetic kind of look. When you have some of the iris covered, then it gives it more of a relaxed kind of look. It doesn't have quite the same bright-eyed, open-eyed look. So the amount of iris that you show will also do something to the expression of the face. If you have, for example, half of the iris covered and some of the pupil covered, then the sort of expression that that gives an eye is like someone who's maybe sleepy or a bit tired or a bit depressed. And if we go in the opposite direction, so this is our top eyelid, and we have the pupil and iris actually being covered by the bottom eyelid, then we end up with kind of a scared looking eye. So the positioning of the pupil and the iris is really important for the expression, for the and how the character is sort of feeling, what emotion you're conveying with that. Now we'll finish off the eyes. So the bits that are missing, there's a couple of things that are missing. We're missing the highlights on the eyes, and we're missing a little bit of tone. So there's two different tones in the eye here. There's the light area of the iris, and there's the dark area of the iris. Now, whether you're doing this in color or whether you're doing this in black and white, it doesn't really matter. The same principle of there being an area of the iris that is getting light and an area of the iris that is in shadow, that's what we're looking at. So if we start off putting in an area of the iris that's in the light. So if you're doing this with pencil, you can just very lightly cover that whole iris with a little bit of a mid-tone. And then to put in the shadow area, making a semicircle. Semicircle here. And so leaving this part down the bottom here lighter, and a semicircle. See, the semicircle is this way, semicircle of darker tone at the top. And what that's describing is that the top eyelid is casting a shadow. Now we've got a sense of where the light is coming from. The light is coming from over here on the left. And we've got two highlights. Now one highlight should technically be slightly darker than the other. This one that's down here, because this one is a highlight that's going through the eye. And then we should have a really strong highlight, which is our main highlight. And that's where the light is hitting the outside of the eye. And that gives our eye a nice three-dimensional look. Now, as I say, there's lots and lots of different kinds of eyes that we can do. And we will do some different examples of eyes, but this is a pretty classic, pretty common feminine anime eye. Let's put a couple of eyelashes on the bottom part of the eye. And we'll put in an eyelid across the top. And then eyebrow. You can give it whatever kind of eyebrow you like. got a very thin eyebrow in this. And I would say in general, anime characters probably do have pretty thin eyebrows. But I know that that's not the trend at the moment. The trend is for much thicker eyebrows. So you could give her thicker eyebrows if you like. So we've got anime eyes and eyebrows. And as I mentioned, the rest of the facial features, if we look at her nose is straight up just a small dash. And then her mouth is 2 dashes. If we wanted, we could put a little bit underneath the lip as well. And what these 2 dashes are representing is the opening of the mouth. So it's not representing the top lip, as in this part, the philtrum to the top lip. It's representing the gap between the lips. And quite often you do see in anime as well, they will skip the middle part of that gap. And so really just show either side. Now with this as well, the expression's very subtle. So if we just changed the corners of the mouth and brought them up, suddenly she'd be smiling. If we brought them down, suddenly she's sad. So even though there's not that much in terms of detail on the mouth, the angle that you put into it does make a big difference. Yes, I did just get your message, Amalia, saying, can I make her smile? Of course you can. You can do whatever you like. So if you want to make her smile, you can definitely turn the corners of that mouth up and she'll be smiling. Let me get a little bit closer and make it more tidy. Now, I would also say the width, like the amount of mouth that you put here, so the width of that mouth will say something about the character. So the smaller the mouth is, the more petite she's going to look, and probably the younger as well. Now, last things we're going to do is finish off the rest of the face. But before we do that, let's have a little think about hair and hairstyle. So you can do, at this point, whatever hairstyle you like. I'm going to give her a fringe if you want to copy what I'm doing. And I'm just blocking the length of that out. And hair, it's always going to be higher than the top of the skull. So bring your hair up a little bit higher than the top of the skull. And give it a part as well. So have it come from one or the other side of the head. It can come from the middle of the head, but it needs to have that sort of little M shape, like it's dipping down. And so I'm putting that in as a sketch first. And so now I can be more specific. And then with my ink line, oops, she's got a mole on her face now. Get rid of that. And with hair, I think the big thing is group it together. So I think the number one mistake people make with hair is they try and draw every individual hair, when really what you're generally seeing with hair is kind of things that are clumped together and then some variation at the edges. So down here, you might separate some of these out into curves. And this is going to be the side of her face. So I'm inking her jawline now, refining that shape. Quite often with hair as well, in anime, you'll see the eyebrows or the eyes through the hair, like the hair is slightly transparent. Putting an ear on, bit more hair coming down here. Let's pull back. There we go. Oops, missed one of her ears. Hang on, go in to ear. Oops. Other ear here. So ear lining up with the bottom of the nose. We'll go behind that bit of hair. All right, I can get rid of my sketch lines. And there we go. Got young anime girl with hair. Now, while you're still finishing off, I haven't checked my email, so let me see if anyone has sent anything through. Did anyone want to show me any of your images? You can just hold them up to your screen as well. I'm happy to have a look. And if there's any questions. You can see everyone's still drawing, so. Looks good, Amalia. Very nice. And Alice and Annabelle, I can see you showing me yours as well. Can you hold yours up again? I just missed it. So if you want to show me, just pop it in the chat just so that I make sure that I'm looking at your video. Oh yes, very cute. I like the one I open, one I close. It's really good. Here we go in there. Yeah, looks good. So I think most of what I've seen so far as well, you've got the right idea in terms of the proportions, because that's the really important thing, is making sure that the position of the eyes is in the right spot, and that the eyes are more than halfway down the face if you're going from top to bottom. So if the eyes are too high, then you end up with a character that either looks too old or it just doesn't have that anime kind of look to it. It's a really specific part of the anime look. I'm just going to put my email in the chat again. I think a few people have ended up sending to like just replying to their enrollment, which isn't going to me. That goes to the like admin kind of department, and then they have to forward it on to me. So if you email me directly, then I'll see your work. Okay, so you can keep working on your character, but I want to start talking now about specifics of the eyes, like I said, so doing a little bit more of an example of different kinds of eyes. So let me just get this off the screen. So, for example, here's a few different styles of eyes. And we're looking at similar eyes to the ones that we just did. Slightly more kind of sleepy eye, slightly more kind of angry, kind of Goku fighter kind of eye. And there are just heaps and heaps and heaps of style of eye that you can do. Some of them extremely simplistic, like Izuku, or Luffy from One Piece, or you might have eyes that are a lot more detailed and a lot more kind of interesting, with lots of shiny reflections coming into them and more eyelashes and all that kind of stuff. The first thing that I want to talk about, though, and the first thing that I think is most important when you're starting your eyes, is thinking about the character of the person that you're drawing. So what is it about their character that their eyes will be helping to express? This is a very cute character, so the eyes are very big, and wide, and round. With Naruto, his eyes are more angular because he's more of a serious kind of character, especially as he gets older. If we look at the My Neighbor Totoro characters, you can see their eyes, again, really big pupils, really big irises, and a lot less in terms of lashes, which I think is also describing them being very young. And then, as I mentioned, you have Goku kind of eyes where he's aggressive, and that shape is much more angular, really big eyebrows. So thinking about, as I say, first off, what are the eyes representing? What are they saying about the character? And then also thinking about just general shapes. There's a lot of different shapes that you could do for your eyes. And I'm not just talking about finished eye, I'm talking about the proportion of the eye. So we'll do a few now. Some shape examples that we could look at. The angry, aggressive kind of eye, we're looking at triangular kind of eyes. So built very much on a triangle. More cutesy kind of eye, so more of the chibi style eye. We'd definitely say it's more rounded, but more than that, I would say we're looking at an eye where overall the proportion is it's taller than it is wide. So if we're going to start with a more angular kind of base, we're looking at something that's taller than it is wide. The eyes that we just did, they're built more on the sort of rhombus kind of eye. So like a rectangle, but there's been slightly squashed and pushed over. We'll just make more room for those ones. Making this one a bit smaller. I'll make these ones a bit smaller too. But starting with this same idea of get the shape of the eye first, and get the position of the eye, and get the overall size of the eye. So are they the right distance from each other? Are they equal before you start drawing the eye? Then I'm going to reduce those sketches down. So we're going to do three. We're going to do three examples here. And we're going to do angry style eye, chibi style eye, and more of the slightly more realistic kind of eye. So let's start off with angry eyes. Zoom in here. So big part of the angry eyes is that we've also got some brow coming down. So the angle of the eye is not just about the shape of the eye opening, it's also about this idea that there's angry brows coming down, creasing over the eye. And you might have a bigger kind of eyebrow shape coming off of that as well. Then position of the iris and pupil, still important. And for the rest of the shape of the eye, we want to have the slightly more rounded bottom eyelid, and then flattening that bottom eyelid under the iris and pupil. And then creases in that brow. So that's giving us the basis for some angry eyes. And we can ink over the top of those. Now, if we've got angry, aggressive eyes, it's probably going to be pretty thick, angry, aggressive eyebrows as well, I would think. Put in those creases between the eyebrows. So the position of the pupil and iris is still important. And corner of the eye. So this is representing that bottom eyelid coming in. Flatten under the iris there. Now if I take away my sketch lines, there we go. Angry, very angry. If we want, we can put more into the irises as well. We can even do a different color. Though I know everyone's working with just straight pencil at the moment. If you've got a color pencil, you could put in a bit of color to that. Same thing we did before. A shadow is being cast by the eyebrows, and that is making a slightly semicircular shape. I'm just tidying up the black inking here. And then we need a highlight. And the position of the highlight, the position and the shape of the highlight, it doesn't always have to be a circle. So it can be a circle, that can be your highlight. Or, especially in the case of someone who's scowling, maybe it's going to be more of a dash, a white kind of dash. And if you're drawing this with pencil, this is going to be using maybe a plastic eraser so that you can remove some of the tone or draw around it. So that's nice, angry eyes. How do we all do with our angry eyes? Still going? Let's have a look at more of the cutesy kind of chibi eyes. So with this, as I said, we're looking at something that's probably going to be more rounded. We'll still have a corner, usually. So you still have a little bit of eyelash. It's filling up that entire sort of big rectangular shape. And then bottom eyelid. Coming up here. And again, you can see I'm doing that, what I mentioned before, building it up on both sides at the same time. So not just doing one side and then the other, trying to build it up on both sides at the same time. Now, in terms of the iris and pupil for this one, we might either have, as with the Zuku, an iris and pupil that's sort of in the middle of the overall eye shape. Or, and this is also pretty common, we might have the iris and pupil extended to become a bigger, more oval shape. Because the shape of the eye has been extended, you might have the iris and pupil extended as well to match. So you can decide which one you want to do. I'm going to do slightly smaller, so we get like an excited eye kind of look. With the eyebrow on this, eyebrow is probably going to be up a bit higher and peaking. And this is very simple line work on this style of eye as well. So you don't want lots of detail, because we're going for more of a cute kind of character look. I'm going to keep the line work on this one pretty thin. Make it nice and thin as it comes down here to the inside of the eye. Very thin on the underside of the eye. As I said before as well, if you need to turn your face around to get a better angle for drawing, and you turn your paper around, definitely do so. I'm always doing that. A little bit of that corner of the eye shape. Now, even with this one, even though it is simplified, we'd still want to have a sense of there being where the light is. So I'm putting still a little bit of tone into that iris. And then with the highlight, make that highlight cut out some of the pupil there. So let's have a look at that without the sketch. So that's going to be a pretty cute kind of character. All right. And let's have a look. Last one, the eyes that we'll do is having a look at that, more of that classic kind of style that we were looking at for the example that we did as well. So this is more the rhombus kind of shape. And it's a rhombus because it's sort of arching, going lower on the inside than it is on the outside. So the outside is slightly higher. Gives it that more of a sleek kind of cat look. And even though the general shape is a rhombus, you could also still be making this more open as well if you wanted. So it could also be more open, but the overall shape is that rhombus kind of shape. And I'd say this is probably one of, aside from the more really stylized, this is probably the most common, I would think. So setting up that shape of the eye first. Iris, pupil. This one probably have a little bit more of the top eyelid. And I think in terms of creativity, this is one where you do get to have a bit more of a play, doing colors and shine, making the eyes look more mysterious or more elegant. As I said, this is very similar to the one that we did on the main face that we practiced earlier. So getting thinner as it comes to the inside of the eye. Got the pupil, I've got the pupil just touching the top eyelid. And the iris is partially covered. And bottom eyelid, a couple of lashes. Bottom eyelid doesn't come all the way down and under. Usually you don't define the whole of the bottom eyelid. And then the two tones. Now, adding to this, if we want to make it slightly more realistic as well, we've got the two tones, so one tone for the general color of the iris, and then and then another one that is doing the shadow. We could also, just down here on the rim of the iris, we can make that rim of the iris slightly lighter, which, when we put the highlight on, reflects where that highlight is coming in from and gives it a slightly more realistic look. Not quite big. And you don't just need one highlight either, you can have multiple highlights. You could also be adding a little bit more detail to the iris. And with all of these, you can play around a little bit with making it more realistic, less realistic, more kind of sketchy, less sketchy, and especially once you start to get color involved, you can have a lot of fun. We can put a tiny bit of shadow into the actual eyeball as well. So let's take away the sketch from that. So we've got three different kind of anime eyes. Now I mentioned noses and mouths, and that there's not as much that goes on with noses and mouths. So if we're looking at something like little link here, literally a dot. Same with the example we did before, the nose was just a dot or a very small line. Sometimes it might be like a kind of an L shape for the nose. Sometimes you might put in a little bit of the nostril, but generally noses are very reduced on anime. That's a big character of the anime sort of face, is how reduced the noses are. I think the other example here, if we look at Goku, he's got like a triangular shadow shape on his nose, as well as that L. And then for mouths, we've already talked about how with mouths, generally you're looking at the line where the lips meet. That's the main element of the mouth that we're looking at. But we haven't really gone into an open mouth or a smiling mouth and what goes on there. So let's talk about that a little bit as well. We're still primarily looking at the opening of the mouth as opposed to the whole shape on the top and bottom of the lips. But often you might see as well a little bit of the tongue or the teeth in an open mouth. So if we come back to our drawing that we did before, that's the wrong template. Where is she? There she is. So nose variations, we could be looking at rather than just a line, we could be looking, turn it up a bit. We could be looking at a triangle, which would then normally also have a little bit of tone. Or we could be looking at a pretty simple kind of, zoom in a bit more, a simple kind of L. Or we could even just be looking at the nostrils themselves. Or it might be the underside of the nose. There's a little triangle to represent the underside of the nose, but it's very reduced. And I would say you're either thinking about the underside of the nose or one side of the nose. You're not looking at both sides of the nose. So a lot of, especially when kids are young, they'll often draw a nose like this. Does that look familiar? So that's very descriptive. It's describing every part of the nose. It's describing both sides of the nose and both nostrils. But anime style and even more realistic style, generally what you'll see is one side of the nose. So just one bridge where the shadow is being cast. And then you might get the nostrils, or you might just literally get a tiny bit of the underside. And with the mouth, lips together. But if we were going to have mouth open, the main kind of shape we're looking at is probably kind of a D on its side. And often you'll see the top part filled in and like a semicircle underneath to be the shape of either teeth or tongue. Now, different mouth shapes are going to say different things as well. The bigger the mouth, the more happy and open and excited the person is. But you could also show like a sad open mouth expression by changing the angle of the corner of the mouth. So if you're bringing the corner of the mouth down, just like if we bring the corner of the mouth down when it's open, sorry, when it's closed, then you get a much sadder expression. So if you haven't already, maybe have a go changing the expression on your example drawing as well. Open, shocked mouth. There's lots of different mouth expressions to do. Obviously, we can't go through absolutely everything today, but what I more want you to be doing, I guess, is as you're looking at anime, as you're trying to draw anime for yourself, really looking at the examples that are out there and thinking about what it means when you're looking at them. So What are the eyes saying about the character? How much or how little of the nose are they showing? What does that say about the character? And then with the expressions on the mouth, how is that helping give the emotion of the character as well? You even have ones like this. That's one of my favorites. The angle of it, if it's over here, that says something different. So yeah, have a go changing the expression on your character as well as we finish up. Okay, so almost finished for the morning. As I say, I hope everyone learned something, and I hope it was all useful and good. Before we wrap up, I will just go over one more time just to refresh your memory. So the different stages of drawing the face and different stages of the body. So for drawing the face, we want to have, first off, round circle for the top of the head, and then the jaw shape hanging off of that. And the jaw should be quite small. If you were doing a face that was not directly front on, that was more to the side, just pay attention to the angle, but it's still the same principle. So if the jaw, the middle of the jaw is going to be slightly off to the side over here, that line down the middle of the face is also going to be off to the side, but otherwise it's the same kind of idea. It's just that point would be off to the side. Then the eyes, the top of the eyes halfway down the head, so quite low. And there is one eye width between the width of the eyes. Thinking about your eye shape, think about what does it say about the character? Is it going to be very tall, rounded eyes? Is it going to be short, more trapezoid kind of eyes, rhombus kind of eyes? It's going to be angry triangular eyes. Nose position is about halfway between the middle of the head and the bottom of the chin, and mouth is closer to the nose than it is to the chin. In terms of thinking about drawing the body, we want rib cage, hips and head, straight lines for the arms and legs, triangles for the feet, diamonds or rectangles for the hands. All right. It is 12:30, so that is all for today, for this morning's lesson. As I said, I hope you all learnt a lot and you had fun, had good examples. Let me stop sharing. So we're up on the screen. So if anyone wants to show me your work, I'd love to see your work. If you don't want it to be up on screen, just do let me know, but otherwise. Has anyone got any work they want to share? Nope. That's all right. Well, as I say, I hope you all had a good time. There's a few thank yous coming in from the chat. Well, you're very welcome. Thank you for joining me this morning, and I hope I see you in regular classes sometime. All right. Bye, everybody.